Plenty of news. Today's the day that the commissioner had his annual press conference. People call it the State of the League address. It's never really that. It's Roger Goodell shows up, has some sort of a preliminary comment, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, whatever it may be, and then he just opens it up to questions. They used to always do it on Friday, and they backed off of Friday because by Friday, there's more reporters in town than there is on Wednesday. This year, the happy medium of Thursday because nobody was in town yesterday. So they did it today. And we're going to talk about, Charean, some of the things that he discussed. Let's begin with a clip from the Goodell press conference regarding the NFL's current success or lack thereof when it comes to increased minority hires in key positions. Here's Goodell.
I wonder if you would consider, having some sort of an ownership summit or something to, and I don't mean read the riot act to owners, but I mean to try to talk to owners personally or maybe in a large group when you can get together about emphasizing that we are not doing this well. We've got to do it better.
Peter, everything you just said there, I've said on multiple occasions this year. As I said to you in response to the question Lindsay asked, I'm not sure, other than the February meeting where we discussed the labor agreement, that we didn't raise this issue and the importance of doing this better, considering policies to help us in this case, and enacting policies. And the ownership shown their commitment in that. So the answer is yes, we'll have more discussions for sure, both individually and collectively when we can get together. But that doesn't stop us. We've been doing it on Zoom. We've been doing it individually. And the committee has been very active, too, chaired by Art Rooney and several owners that are on that committee, and continuing to look what are the changes we still need to make. And I'll reinforce again, while we may be disappointed in the head coaches, at the end of the day, there are a lot of positives here that we need to build on and we need to continue to make progress on. And that commitment is there.
Tom Curran inspired for me the phrase that Roger Goodell is the world's highest paid pincushion. And in many respects, Charean, that is true. He is the face that deals with questions like that, issues like that, so the 32 owners can quietly hide behind the curtain while Goodell does it. In a situation like this, though, there's a combination of being the pincushion but also the cat herder. And you have to herd these billionaire cats, and it's not easy. And at the end of the day, these folks are going to do what they want to do individually. Collectively, it shows it's not good enough. Individually, good luck convincing any of them to do anything other than what they damn well want to do.
And here we are, Mike. It's a new year. It's the same question. It's the same question we had last year, the year before that to the NFL. They expanded the Rooney Rule. It got more interviews. It didn't result in more hirings. We saw David Culley go to Houston, and we saw Robert Saleh go to the Jets, and that was it. And with a league that's 70% minority as far as its players goes, it's just not good enough with where they are now. In the coaching. Now, I do agree with him. They made strides with general managers and they made strides with coordinators. They did not make strides with the head coaches. And Art Rooney talked last week about having to expand the rule again. I don't know what else you do to expand the rule because, as you said, Mike, each individual owner is going to act on his own.
Now, I hope that the creation of a pipeline that will be more robust will result naturally in more minority candidates becoming head coaches, but that's where the numbers become glaring. You've got 70% of the league, the players are black. 35%, I think, is the number that I've seen out there over and over again of the assistant coaches. And then a ridiculously small percentage, less than 10%, black head coaches. There's something missing in that progression. And one key is the opportunity to groom, the requirement to groom, the obligation to give opportunities, because there are, of all races and shapes and sizes, there are qualified candidates. They just need the chance to grow. They need the chance to blossom. They need the chance to develop. And I think that's a big part of this. But look, here's the other reality. And this is the thing that I would assume the NFL prefer I not say. This is the thing that I never hear anyone else say in the media, so it could mean that I'm in la-la land with this. But I believe the calculation has been made at the highest levels of the league, specifically Jeff Pash, the general counsel who advises Roger Goodell on legal matters. I think they are comfortable and confident that, yes, there's a PR component to this. And, yes, they're going to take some flack periodically. But there really isn't a risk of anyone suing them over it. That's the thing that spurred action with the creation of the Rooney Rule. It was Cyrus Mary and Johnny Cochran banging on the door saying, you guys are going to get sued and you're going to lose. 19 years later, I don't think they have that fear. I think they know there's no one out there who's going to give up his career or risk giving up his career, because there's a chance you become the Colin Kaepernick of coaches if you're the one who files the lawsuit against the NFL alleging racial bias in hiring practices. I think they believe that they aren't at risk of that. And until they believe they are at risk of that, they're going to talk every year. They're going to take the heat. Roger Goodell is going to earn part of his millions and millions of dollars in compensation by being the one who has to answer the questions. They get through it, and then they just move on. I feel like that is the track it's going to continue to stay on without any type of dramatic change being forced, because it won't be forced without the threat of litigation.
And we've expanded it, Mike, and I'm sure they'll expand it some way going forward. But unless owners are committed to hiring a minority coach, it's just not going to happen. At the same time, I have been as critical of anyone as Houston, and you have too. We've been very critical of the Texans the past however long months. But I will give them full credit for this, because just because no one's heard of a head coach doesn't mean he can't be a good head coach. And we talk all the time about minorities getting a chance. They're out there. They just need to find them. Houston did a great job of finding one they think they can win with in David Culley. And just because people haven't heard about him doesn't mean that he can't do a good job, and he hasn't done a good job in the past. So they hired a minority coach. I will give them full credit for that. And I think they had 3 minorities on their finalist list for the head coaching position. So if I'm going to give Houston credit for anything, it's going to be for that. But let me ask you this, Mike. Do you think there would be less criticism if Eric Bieniemy had gotten, say, the Houston job instead of David Culley? Would there have been less criticism now of the league and its minority hiring?
I think if he'd gotten any job, there would have been less criticism. Because let's face it, with Culley, there's still this perception and possible reality that it was a Jack Easterby inside job, that this is a guy that Jack Easterby knows won't threaten the fiefdom that Easterby has created. He's going to be so grateful to have a job at age 65 when it looked like his ship was never going to come in. The ship wasn't even on the horizon for David Culley. So all of a sudden he gets an opportunity to be a head coach. He ain't going to rock the boat. And to the extent that there's any truth to the notion that's kicking around league circles that it's Culley for a few years and then they groom Josh McCown, who has not yet been named to David Culley's staff, but we'll see if that ultimately happens, that's part of this Easterby master plan. That's what undermines the Culley hire in the view of people who are plugged in. That Culley is part of this broader master plan that Jack Easterby has concocted, and he's just a pawn on the chessboard. Eric Bieniemy would have been a different dynamic altogether in Houston. He's a guy who's going to come in and, as I've said before, tell Jack Easterby, get the hell out of my locker room. That's one of the reasons why I think Bieniemy and others didn't get that job, because it cuts against what Easterby's trying to do. So that's my hesitation. But I agree that if anyone had hired Bieniemy, it wouldn't be a problem, because he's the guy who's on deck. He's there. He's not in the on-deck circle. He's in the batter's box. And he's in the spot that has produced Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winner, Matt Nagy, Coach of the Year, and Eric Bieniemy's been stalled there, and he's been the offensive coordinator the 3 years that Patrick Mahomes was the quarterback. So, then I saw that Andy Reid said that the Eagles ultimately didn't interview Eric Bieniemy when they created the impression that they did. This is going to continue to hover over the league until someone hires Eric Bieniemy, and I just fear, and this gets back to the billionaire's privilege, they can say, well, these are things we need to address, but you have to ultimately convince one of the billionaires to hire Eric Bieniemy, and I feel like at a certain level, they don't like the rest of us telling them what to do, period.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Mike, and they're going to continue to do what they do, and I'm not sure how you expand it any further. I mean, they said you have to interview more minority candidates, okay? They did that, and more minorities were interviewed than ever before. That part of it worked. And then they were going to give these incentives to teams that develop minority candidates who are hired. Well, they've done that now. So I don't know where you go from here, how you expand the rule, because ultimately it is up to these owners to hire minority candidates, and they just haven't done it year after year after year after year. And here Bieniemy sits yet again looking for a head coaching job that hasn't come to him. And frankly, like you said, he's earned it. He's the next guy. He's in the batter's box, and he's been in the batter's box now for 3 years.
One of the other aspects of the hiring process that others have advocated, we've been banging that drum this hiring cycle as well, tabling all interviews and hires until after the Super Bowl. Roger Goodell was asked about that today. Here's that exchange.
This is an issue. We had a lot of discussion with the Fritz Pollard Alliance, who we worked very closely on developing the policies this offseason. Many coaches, and it's something I'm sure will be brought back up again. As you know, this season, as part of our policy, where technology really actually was a benefit for us, was this technology we're going through right now, virtual. They were able to have interviews by Zoom, and that gave coaches an opportunity to interview without being as disruptive for their preparations while they're in the postseason. Head coaches felt better about it. I've talked to a couple other coaches that are in the league now that didn't get an opportunity, both white and black, who talked about that potential change. And so we'll have to balance that and think if that's the right outcome or whether there's some other alternative.
May have gotten a phone call from Microsoft after the gratuitous reference to Zoom. That's a different business issue altogether for the National Football League. I probably shouldn't have said that, but I don't care. And the point is, yeah, they're going to talk about it. They talk about it. They talk about everything. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. There's a difference between talk and action. There's plenty of time for talking, and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. They're so afraid of unintended consequences. That becomes the excuse for avoiding any meaningful change. And I hate that phrase. Unintended consequences to me, Charean, is a cop-out for we don't want to or we're not able to sit down and brainstorm the reasonably foreseeable consequences of what we are going to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of creativity or brain power to spot 10, 15, 20 things that you can anticipate on the back end of any major change you make. And yes, there would be unintended consequences, but there would be expected consequences that you would weigh as part of the effort to consider this change. But I think it's a smart change. I think it's a necessary change because what it does, it eliminates that inherent conflict of interest that the assistant coach has, regardless of race, regardless of background, regardless of anything. When you're under consideration for that job, you're balancing how much time do I put into preparation for my interview? How much time do I put into getting ready for the next game in the postseason? It's a horrible burden to put on an assistant coach, and the best thing to do is table everything until after the Super Bowl.
And they're always worried, Mike, about falling behind in the race for assistant coaches because if somebody fills a job early, they're hiring the best available assistant coaches and leaving the rest out there for the last hire. In this case, it was Houston, so you're having to make hires of other people who are no longer available. So there's some of that. So if you push everyone back past the Super Bowl, there's not that urgency to go hire a head coach so you can get the assistant coaches you want because they'll all be there if everyone has to wait to hire a head coach. And I think that's important. I do think that will help. Anything you can do to make it better, to level the playing field, to give these guys more of a chance to become head coaches, I think is great.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.